Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, narrated by Disney, or on Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it, Legends. Again, it's been a long time since I've actually read this. Um, One of the earliest things I read post Return of the Jedi. Um, so it's been a long time since I've actually been here. Um, but we're at it. I didn't take notes this time because unlike a lot of the EU, this is the one that everyone kind of knows about, whether they're, a big fan or not. Everybody kind of knows about the Zahn books because Zahn also writes in the new canon and Thrawn's in the new canon. Everybody knows about these books. It's so many other stories that they tend to ignore and say are bad, and that this was the only good one. Is this trilogy the best thing ever? Well, I guess we'll find out. I won't be here too long though, because non spoilers really. Um, Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn. Before anything, we must, of course, address what this book did. Star Wars was dying, right? We had the old Marvel comics, but those got finished up around issue 107, and it was on a steady decline. I mean, I enjoyed them, other people enjoyed them, but they weren't popular anymore. They were dying off. We had the Ewoks TV show, we had a Droids TV show, couple other things here and there, Droids comics, Ewoks comics, but in the Ewok movies, but the universe was dying. People were moving on. Nobody cared anymore, right? The 80s was a great time for movies and stuff. And so was the 90s, So people were moving on from Star Wars. Star Wars ended in what, the early 80s? A lot of good things in the 80s. People were moving on to different franchises, to different things. And then we get this book. No matter of your opinion of this book, whether you think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, whether you think it's good, whether you think it's overrated and bad, it doesn't matter. You must acknowledge this historical fact that this revitalized Star Wars in the 90s. Because of this book, you had all of the Bantam era of Star Wars books. You have the prequels, which may or may not have existed without these books, because George may have not planned on making prequels all the time, but the regardless of his plans, I don't know if people would have been excited for it by the end of the 90s if not for the EU keeping fans invested in the universe, because there was nothing else. There was no prequels. The first prequel movie came out in 99, so in between that time all you had was the expanding universe, and this was the birthplace of it truly growing into what it became. Yes, we had the Marvel comics, we had a couple things here and there, but if it were not for this book, you wouldn't have everything that you have, and everything moving forward kind of builds off of this, whether it be Courtship of Princess Leia, or the X-Wing books, or, things moving forward, like with, New Jedi Order. All of that is able to exist, Legacy of the Force, Fate of Jedi, whatever you want. It all starts with this book, and for that, it must get praise. That being said, is it the holy trinity of the expanding universe? I was very hyped to read this book. This was my 7, 8, and 9. And I think I have a more nuanced opinion of this book now, but I don't think my opinion would change in the fact that this is still my 7, 8, and 9. Now, Dark Empire is going to be 10, 11, and 12, but I definitely think this, and then I guess what Jedi Academy would be like, because you could probably condense that to like 13, 14. And then what's probably the next really important one that is absolutely necessary? I guess the Corellian trilogy, which could probably, if you do it right, you could condense that into a single movie. And the New Jedi Order would be like 6 films in themselves, and then moving on from that. So, but this first book reintroduces us to this universe. And everybody, unlike Zahn's previous books, which I am one of the people I have harped on Zahn. I have not been the kindest to Zahn in pretty much all the books except for Outbound Flight that I've been reviewing. But I will still give props to this man. Here he gets it. This was his lightning in the bottle. I think he just lost it after this. Some people try to argue the Hand of Thrawn is better. I don't. I think it's too long. It's not bad, but it's too long. It didn't need to be two books. But here is lightning in the bottle. I know people have issues with it. That's more in the second one and stuff, and we'll get into that. But just what this man did. I mean, Luke feels like Luke. It feels like a natural progression of where he ended, in Return of the Jedi. I mean, you have more nuance there when you get into the EU, where you have Truce Bakora, you have Shadows over Mindor, you have all that stuff to kind of in Heart of the Jedi now to kind of help boost that trajectory. But even still, you can see that if you've only read Heir to the Empire after Return of the Jedi, you still see that as a natural progression of where he started. Han and Leia feel like Han and Leia, you know? And it's great to see them just it feels like the characters you saw in the movies just on the page. You can hear those lines coming from Harrison Ford or from Lando Calrissian, who's also written great here. You know, you hear it in the lines because it feels like them. It really, really does. And of course, we get introduced to a whole assortment of new, really interesting characters. They get overused in other places, but here they're really interesting. We have Card. Card's a wonderful new addition, right? Mara Jade is she's actually. I see. Here's the thing. I forgot. Okay, because I found her not that interesting in the books that she's featured in the other stuff. Like she's had a couple comics, right? She's fine in the Allegiance in Choices of One's novel, she's fine. But here, I actually care about her character. This is where her character actually begins to be something. Other than a cardboard cutout, I am the Emperor's hand. Blah, 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 blah. It's boring, but here it works. When she's first introduced, it works the best by Zahn. Other people probably do her better than Zahn, hot take. But she's done really well here. I'm actually interested in, even though I already know it, I already know her backstory and everything, and I know where it's going. I still enjoy the interactions that she has with Luke in this story. And then, of course, I have to give it to Thrawn. Thrawn is just so much fun to read about. It's like reading Sherlock Holmes in Star Wars. He's such an interesting villain, especially with the to give it to Zahn again with Outbound Flight. It's a much more nuanced thing. He's still more villainous here, but there's this sense that like he's the villain because our heroes are in danger, but like he's the hero of his own story. And you can feel that because well, Vader would get upset with his subordinates and choke them to death. And there is a similar thing here, but it's a different reason. We get a similar scene where a character dies because, they failed. They failed him. But it's not simply because they failed him that he killed him. It's because the guy tries to shift the blame on somebody else instead of taking responsibility for his own actions. And that's what pisses off Thrawn. That's what gets him killed. And even still, he does not like to spend his men's lives recklessly or unnecessarily. And he just he already here without any of that other stuff. He is a nuanced antagonist, and I enjoy that about him. And Pelion, he's not exactly the goat that he'll become. He's kind of just our perspectives of Thrawn, but Pelion is still great here. And of course, see my boy Akbar. He's great. We get introduced to Borsk Fela, the guy that you love to hate, even though respect because of New Jedi Order, but that's a long way off. Um, that forever changed my opinion of him. I'm sorry. Those who know. Um, but yeah, I think everything about this book just does everything so great in bringing people back to the franchise, as a true episode 7 should. In some ways, I think Dark Empire is absolutely better, but I think this is a better introduction back into the world than Dark Empire is, in some ways. Though I like Dark Empire a lot. Um, and I'm excited to talk about a particular story that has been released recently, of that is related to Dark Empire. So, um, but yeah, all the character interactions are great. The stuff we learn about the Nogri and Vader, that's a lot of fun. Um, some of the grievances I have with Zahn is other people have mentioned this, but he really loves the word sardonically. It is used so often in this book. If you like do a drinking game of every time sardonically is used, you might be dead. It's used a lot. Um, Now I can understand why people would be bored in certain parts. Yes, but I still don't think that it warrants like thinking that this book sucks at all. I can't agree with that. Try reading Bounty Hunter Wars and then come back to me and tell me that this book is bad. Oh man, I can't get over that. That's gonna be my new standard for bad. Sorry, different topic. But overall, just a fantastic introduction back into the universe. I mean, of course, I've been reading everything post Return of the Jedi, but as it stands, this was an achievement. Zahn made Star Wars relevant again, and you have to give praise where praise is due. And we'll see how I feel about Dark Forces Rising and The Last Command, but this was a solid reintroduction to the universe. And one last thing, I love how political this book is. I mean, it's not like super, it's not like our world politics, but people always call the prequels boring because of politics, and yet here politics is, and I enjoy it. I love seeing the New Republic and seeing the struggles that they're going through. I enjoy that aspect of the universe. And it goes further into this and other things like Black Fleet Crisis or all of New Jedi Order. Politics is not boring. It enhances a world. Look at Deep Space Nine for Star Trek or Babylon 5 for other examples of how to do that. It's not boring. But anyway, that's about it without getting into spoilers. I will say, I mean, the I forgot to mention a super important character, so let me. We also have Sabaoth, which is less interesting now that we have Outbound Flight, I guess I'll say. If you haven't read Outbound Flight, then you might not feel that way. But seeing as how the crazy clone of Sabaoth isn't that crazy because he's not too far off from what his actual person was, I don't know. Because the actual Sabaoth was almost just as bad. So, um, maybe a little less crazy, but still just as arrogant and a prick. So, um, but Sabaoth and Wayland and everything with that is interesting. And I'm excited to see more of him moving forward because he's kind of in the beginning and he kind of fricks off for the rest of the book. Um, Along with Leia starting to begin her Jedi training, even though that isn't really followed up in many books in the Bantam era, it really is only it starts to show in New Jedi Order, but she doesn't really get a lot of chances to shine with that. And say what you will about the Denning verse, but at the very least, we actually get to see Leia throw down, and it's like so late, but it's so satisfying to finally get to see her do that because she doesn't for most of the Bantam era, and she gets one moment against a Hutt, and then maybe a couple times in the new Jedi Order, but it's not enough to even really mention. Um, but they spend most of their time on Merkur, which is another important planet moving forward. And that's where Card has his secret base, and that's where a lot of the drama kind of finishes off. Although the final battle's on Sluis Fan. Um, and that's about the gist. I'm trying to think too. Um, what am I missing? I don't know. I think it's pretty much all I have to say. Uh, and then of course, oh, sorry, we get to see Coruscant, which is another important thing got to mention because the prequels hadn't come out yet. George Lucas never cared about the EU, never cared about the EU. He didn't consider the EU canon. Da, 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 da. Never read anything. Da, 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 da. Never cared about it. And yet used a word to describe or to name a planet in his own films. Because Coruscant comes from this book, but people are going to keep saying that George never looked into it or never cared about it. We also get Kashyyyk in this book, which we never really had any showings of it before besides the, I guess, holiday special. So that was really fun too. Of course, if you're a Star Wars fan, you know what Kashyyyk is. Um, but at the time, it was the first time you really got to explore it. And yeah, I think that's about the gist of what I'm going to talk about. So I'll see you all when I reread Dark Force Rising. Till then, may the Force be with you.